Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Triage Through a Proactive Approach to Care, brought to you by CareXM. I am Patrick Philbin with Home Healthcare News, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion. Before I introduce our speakers, a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, please note your audio has been muted to ensure sound quality. If you want to ask a question, please do so by using the question function on your screens. We'll try to field as many of those as we can towards the bottom of the hour. Also, we'll be sharing a replay of this webinar to everyone who registered. Okay, so time to meet our speakers. I think that's the next slide. Yes, wonderful. Okay, on today's webinar, we'll hear from Bridger Meekum, the Vice President of Marketing at CareXM, and Sarah O'Brien, the Clinical Implementations Manager at CareXM. Bridger and Sarah, thanks so much for being with us today. Okay, on today's webinar, we'll hear about a few different topics, starting with the current issues home health and hospice are facing on a macro level, on the healthcare organization level, as well as the staff level. Then we will discuss the shifts in patient decision-making, followed by integrated strategies to elevate the patient experience. Okay. Thank you so much to CareXM for bringing this webinar today. CareXM, for those not familiar, has been involved with the telehealth in home health and hospice since 2008, serving over 4,000 providers in 49 states with over 7 million patient interactions each year. And again, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put them in the questions section of your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll answer them as time allows. And again, the recording of this will be made available after the conclusion of today's webinar. And so without further ado, I'll kick it to Bridger and have you all take it from here.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you to everyone that's joining us today live, as well as anyone that, of course, will watch this on their own accord later on the recording. We truly appreciate the time, the passion, the energy. That's truly what we care about is the passion and energy between us banding together to try and solve for some of the core challenges that we're facing in home health and hospice, but overall in healthcare. And it really does take us all banding together to innovate, to talk through different strategies, to understand each other more, to drill down into the root core of some of the issues that we're facing and how we can truly transform and elevate healthcare overall and the care experience for really all involved. So thank you for joining us today. To start, you see this slide, balancing the patient and clinician experience. To me, that's a pulling force. It's something that every time I look at, you throw in trying to lower costs while trying to deliver an elevated care experience, both for patient and clinician, while delivering better patient outcomes. That's a natural tug of war that we're all facing together here, of how do I accomplish an elevated patient experience, which to me is an opportunity cost of more effort, which has a cost to it, as well as investing further dollar-wise. So there's the financial portion, as well as just the simple mind share and opportunity cost of trying to accomplish all four of those goals in healthcare. So we'll talk through a little bit of that more in detail, kind of breaking it down within each level in healthcare, specifically in home health and hospice, and look forward to any questions, of course, that you guys have. I'll cover the portions with some of the problems and some of the shifts that we're seeing in patient decision making, which is very aligned with consumer decision and buying behaviors that have shifted quite a bit. And as we're dealing with really the sheer volume of patients that want to age in place, of patients that want their end of life care in the home as well, as we're dealing with that while seeing shifting expectation as well, where we have more demand from patients, but now we have more demand from an expectation management standpoint as well. I want my calls answered more quickly. I want my scripts on time. And shifting, especially in the value-based purchasing environment, going into more of a proactive type strategy is truly what we all need to be focused on. I think the companies in home health and hospice, the agencies that are going to win long term are going to be flexible and agile. And so we'll talk through some of that as well. Next slide. Perfect. So this to me really evokes a lot of for lack of a better term, I feel like clinicians are often a dumping ground to solve problems and to solve for the increased demands of the patients that we're, signing up, that we're admitting. It's often then passed to the clinician to pick up those pieces. And it creates chaos. It creates, especially on the triage side, especially in an after-hours setting side, where we're required to answer the phones 24/7, 365. Banding together to a point where we can work together and have different strategies that are flexible and agile. To have 100 RNs in your back pocket alleviates your staff. And instead of us competing against each other for more clinicians in a drowning pool, let's come up with strategies that actually help bring people back into the space and create better work-life balance. So, Sarah, who's on this call, who is an RN, can actually focus on a patient while not being on call, and actually has good work-life balance to be there for her kids, her family, and have self-care. Because any of us, me as a father, I'm much better as a dad if I'm taking care of myself as well. And that sounds selfish in some ways, but it's not. It truly is an altruistic point of view that you're a better parent, you're a better caretaker, a better care provider across the board. You give better love to people when you're also taking care of yourself. Next slide, if you don't mind. So really, this quadruple aim, we've hit on this a few times, but how do you achieve both? Well, all four. How do you achieve a better clinician experience, a better patient experience, better patient outcomes while lowering costs all at the same time? Well, there's ways to do it, and we'll talk through some examples of others that we've been able to help with across the board. But like I like to say, whether you partner with us or not, we care about solving the problem. That's really why we get up in the morning. It's why we have the team that we have pulling long hours. We want to shift and change what healthcare is, what that experience is, what end-of-life care is. And we all have personal stories, sadly, and we'll have more, as we go along in this life. So solving this is truly life-changing. Next slide. So I'll be quick on this one. The perception of care, I think, is something that is shifting quite a bit. The perception of how attentive is my care provider? How quickly do they answer the phones? Are they interacting with me on a day-to-day or weekly basis? Do they truly care about how I feel and how I'm doing? And so the perception of care, I think, is of utmost importance now, due to a lot of the stuff that we'll see. 95% of patients, and you'll see this later, they're looking you up on Google before they select you. They might get some referrals from, a larger health system, but they'll get 3 or 4 and they'll vet those. And you can be dang sure that their loved ones are vetting them. They're going to have a person that is going to be the person that, is going to make sure that their loved one is well taken care of. And they do so online. So we'll talk more about that as we go along here. So next, what I'm going to uncover here is some of the macro challenges that we're facing. So you can read this in more detail. I'll kind of give you the cliff notes. But really, the care coordination in a remote-based home care setting is challenging. There's a lot of different applications that we have to use. Do they tie to the EMR? How many places do I have to open to actually drill down and understand what the latest interaction was with a patient? And we're dealing with patients that are in a very emotional state, especially their loved ones. They're managing a chronic condition. They are coming from a post-surgery setting, and they have pain. They have concerns, and you can be dang sure that their loved ones do as well. And this creates a lot of challenge with the after-hours staffing and requirements that we have to do within home health and hospice. This can create more risk in readmissions. And a large part of it too is making sure that when a patient does call in, or when we ideally actually reach out to them first, that we understand truly how they're doing, how the patient truly is doing. We have the latest notes, latest updates, to where they don't have to repeat their story again and again and again. And all the while, we're trying to deliver this with increased demand, like we're talking, where 9 out of 10 adults want to age in place, and expectations are shifting. So there's some solutions that we'll go through here a little bit later. From a healthcare organization level, this one's interesting to me because, and we'll cover this as well, but how do you forecast demand while also trying to staff? Because every time you overstaff, you're losing money. It's hurting that lowered cost standpoint that we're trying to achieve in healthcare. But if you're understaffed, then you're hurting the patient experience. So being able to deal with the shifting demands of call volume, it's why, you know, on a hospice level, the national average is over 30 minutes to connect to someone in a hospice setting, to actually connect to a nurse. We can do that in 32 seconds on average. But every single one of those minutes, those moments matter. And that's, again, where you can face a lot of these challenges of readmission. If you're not answering the call in time, those 10 minutes feel like 10 hours to the people at home, especially the loved ones. And so being able to have first call response, being able to respond quickly within a minute and address any concerns is very important, especially with the shifting demands. Next one. Lastly, on the clinician side, the tools are fragmented. On average, there's 5 to 6 different applications that clinicians are having to log in and log out of to manage a patient interaction. And so being able to have one platform that's EMR integrated is pivotal. You know, I was in framing in high school, and my dad would go off about, you know, don't pick up things twice. He'd see me pick up a stack of studs and set them down, and he was like, why did you set them there? Now you have to go back and go pick them up again. Well, that's kind of the case here with you're having to put in this information and making sure that it's tying in. You're picking it, like they're picking this up multiple times for one patient interaction, for one patient at a time, which is hurting the ability to then treat the next patient, which is why so many clinicians have to be on call while they're also treating a patient. And so being able to bring in one integrated platform is key, you know, in this space. It's going to be key to improve response times. It's going to be key to alleviate burnout and create more bandwidth for clinicians. And it really improved the patient experience overall. So aging in place, I already touched on this a little bit. You guys are, I'm sure, well aware, 90% of Americans 50 plus want to age in their home. 90%, 9 out of 10. That's up from 78% just 2 years ago. That's a big increase in just 2 years. And I think it's only going to continue to increase. The consumer want is shifting, it's changing, and we need to change with it. And not only that, we have to get out ahead of it. Next one. So this to me is not surprising, but you know, the silver tsunami is real. We do have boomers entering this phase of their life. And again, they want to age in place, and we've almost doubled in population 65 plus since 2011. Meanwhile, we have a 1.2 million gap in clinicians over the next 8 years forecasted, meaning we need 1.2 million additional RNs versus what we're supposed to have over the next 8 years. So how do we solve for that? There's a couple things we need to solve for, of course. One is a better patient and clinician experience, definitely on the clinician side, to where they're not leaving in droves, but also how do we create efficiencies that can help solve for this to where we don't have to answer for just simply adding bodies? Can we do it with a strategy? Can we do it with technology? So I was gonna actually have kind of a blanked out thing here and make it a little more, you know, aggressive, you know, get a freaking break kind of thing, but we we went more PG route. Clinicians need a break. They really do. And especially in the hospice setting, you'll hear from our RNs, they truly love their patients and they care for them, and they're losing friends, and it's a repeat cycle. And so dealing with that and being able to be, on call, being able to take care of the patient, well, let's take care of the clinician too, to where, he or she can clock off actually and still get live up to date, notifications on how the patient is doing, to know if is my friend, the person that I'm, taking care of, that I've fallen in love with the last 3 weeks, this impactful person in my life, I want to know how they're doing. And we can answer that, but allow nurses to clock off, allow clinicians to clock off, and let them take care of themselves, their families, their loved ones, whatever else. We need to give breaks to our clinicians. We need to deliver a better clinician experience across the board. And one of the biggest pain points that we've heard is trying to treat patients while on call. Could you imagine? I'll grab my phone here. I'm doing this webinar, speaking to all the wonderful people on here, and anyone that's going to watch the recording later. And let's say I took a phone call. I'm doing a webinar. It's important. I'm not trying to invalidate it, but I take a phone call and I talk to my DirecTV rep about my out of service type stuff. Imagine how that would feel as a viewer, as someone that's watching this, and imagine then how that would feel in a hospital setting, in a hospice setting, just in a healthcare overall setting. And it's so unfair to ask a clinician to do that, to ask him or her to make a decision on what patient is more important. That needs to change. Next slide. So listen to your staff. We do it all the time. I listen to Sarah all the time. She tells me all the time how she's feeling, what she's thinking. But listen to your staff and empower your staff. Make sure that you understand what they're going through, that it's something that, we're actively listening and understanding their true pain points, and let's try and drill down and address them. But your staff, just like in the customer experience setting, they're the ones dealing with the patient day to day. They're the ones that understand a lot of what the patients are feeling, what they're thinking. And so understanding that experience is vital to improving the clinician experience, or the patient experience, excuse me. I'll round this out pretty quick here. The impact of word of mouth. So I hit on this a little bit. As we're in this day and age of everyone has a microphone and can easily access the World Wide Web and various social media platforms, it's very easy for someone to submit a Google review. It's very easy for someone to submit a Yelp review, and it's very easy for them to do that in an emotional state. And so that's a challenge. It's a challenge overall for our space, because what we're dealing with is an emotional state anyway. And so being able to deliver attentive, proactive, personalized care and have empathy is really, I think, what transforms a rating, what transforms a CAP score, what transforms a review, is really just truly connecting with the patient and showing care to the loved ones dealing with it as well. And so the word of mouth, it's only going to get more and more extensive, more and more significant in terms of its impact. You'll see a stat later that I'll share, but patients are not just basing it off of the referral from a doctor. They are looking at you online, they're reviewing you online and in multiple platforms. And due to this, minutes and moments matter. They really do. My wife had a double C-section, and I had to she ran out of her pain medication, and it was late Friday night, and she was really struggling, and it took the provider about 45 minutes to get back to me on the script. And that was dealing with pain, which was painful and definitely hard. But imagine something that's more life and death. Those minutes feel like hours, and those minutes and moments matter. They really do. And so even if it's just taking the information in and acknowledging that I understand what you're going through and quickly trying to address and respond, that's going to make a huge difference in your CAP scores as well as in your online reviews. But those minutes, those moments matter. So the shifts in decision making, I already hit on this stat a little bit, but 95% of patients are looking you up online. They're looking at your reviews online before making a decision, before admitting a patient. And so understanding that and really feeding into that, leaning into it, don't lean away from it, lean into it, because it's not going to change. It's something that will only continue. Consumers, patients are more informed than ever before, and they're looking you up, they're looking everyone up, and in various platforms. And lastly, 70% of patients age 60 plus. So even the 60 plus, they're 70%, 7 out of 10 are looking at your reviews as well. And you can be dang sure that their kids are. This kind of hits in, I already touched on this a little bit, but the ease of research now is I can immediately look up star rating on Google. I can look up hospice near me, highest rated, and find the 4-star, 5-star rating. So customers are educated. They're looking, every single interaction matters. That when we talk about minutes and moments matter, well, those matter with every single patient, every single loved one. So delivering on that is something of utmost importance, especially in today's environment. And lastly, the impact of a negative review. So 4 out of 10 patients will not select a provider with poor reviews. So if you have poor reviews, 4 out of 10 are just, they're nixing you as an option. So overcoming those, making sure that you're addressing those is very important. It'll help with, yes, your referral base, but it'll definitely help with your admittance base. And so making sure that you're paying attention to those and addressing them. A lot of companies aren't perfect. The ones that are actually best in customer experience and experience management overall are the ones that do have problems, but they address the problem. They own the problem. They empathize with the problem. They empathize with the person that went through that experience. And so, you know, even if they're mad as all get out, if you're listening and there, you'll be surprised at how many positive reviews you'll get just by being attentive and listening and trying to address concerns. Any more? Okay. The power of advocacy. So I can tell you right now, I've been in marketing for a while. There's no better marketing tool than an advocate. There's no better asset that you can create than a customer, a patient, a loved one singing your praises as to what type of experience you gave to their loved one. There's nothing more impactful, no clever little tagline, an actual social proof, testimonial, a review. Those are going to impact your business much more than any ad spend that you can do. You definitely do some advertising, not saying not to do that, but the impact of a positive referral, a testimonial is so far reaching. And so making sure that you're encapsulating those, that you're capturing those is important, and getting visibility to prospective patients as well. So lastly, I'll have Grace play this video, and then I'll circle back after the video to shift it over to Sarah.
But having the nursing background and having a nurse the first time you call answer the phone to help with symptoms immediately has made a significant impact on the care that we're able to provide to our patients and families. And the continuity of communication then back via the report portal, we're able to see what happened all day long, in addition to the layer of support that our call center internally provides. It has significantly improved our communication scores.
Our scores went up 10 percentage points within a year. That's crazy. That doesn't happen.
You can see how many calls we're getting around end of life, the amount of refill requests we're getting after hours, how many patients need help with symptoms, or if there's a DME issue, and being able to have the ability for that transparency to go back and then work directly with the staff and put action plans together that flow up to our quality plan. Like, it's just so the transparency just allows for us to really tackle what our true problems are.
Thank you, Grace. So that's one of our many partners. We have lots of videos like that. We need to rotate some new ones in here, but you know, really one thing I will say is truly partnering on the problem is what we're all about. It's purpose-driven, purpose-led. And like I said before, whether you partner with us or not, it's a matter of solving for these problems, especially in home health and hospice, and doing so together. And we'll talk through some strategies. Sarah, my much better half, will talk through you know, some strategies to transform triage through actionable data with business intelligence, intelligent resource and staffing, as well as faster response times, and what that really means from a clinician standpoint, as well as, of course, the patient experience, and really how it can lower costs. We'll talk through a little bit of our fun experiences with some other partners and the results there within. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Bridger. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So Bridger just laid out a really great, impactful overview of what I know you're experiencing. At some level and some piece, he explained what your struggles are. And so you're probably thinking, I know what I'm struggling with. What do I do about it? And so really just transforming your ability to provide the great care that you want, and also support your team and have a fantastic group of nurses caring for your patients. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and how actionable data, intelligent resourcing, and faster response time are really going to be the formula that makes a big impact in your business. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So first, we're going to talk about the balance. You know, we talked about the pains. How do you decrease the pains? Well, balancing are you overworked or overstaffed? Aligning those resources to unscheduled patient interactions, because that's the real struggle. After hours, we're talking about calls that you're not expecting coming in, that's flooding your team. And how can you prepare for that? So as we look at this model, we are looking at a contact care center call volume. The orange line is going to be your staffing, and the gray line is going to be your call volume. So when you're overstaffed, you're losing money. When you're understaffed, your patient experience suffers. This is all something I know you're extremely well versed in. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So how do you align that? What does it look like? How do you strike a balance? And so really the solution is going to be here on the next slide. And that's going to be by forecasting, utilizing business intelligence, and identifying how can you decrease the gap and look at optimized staffing. How do you do that? I mean, we're so used to throwing people at the problem. Well, if we have more nurses, then I can do this, but then you're overstaffed. So what does that look like? You can't just send your nurses home for a couple hours because you don't expect calls. That's just not how it works. So what does it look like? How can you actionably make a difference? What can you do to align? And the answer to that is going to be having the data to make better business decisions. So as we look here at the next slide, time and money, that's the balance, right? That's what we're aligning. Time, money, whether that's call volume is part of your time. What is all of it costing? So the triage center staffed in 1 to 9 seats here, if in that red circle, you can see that their productivity is going to be 29%. A very low productivity rate. That's where a lot of companies are working. And if you do have the ability to have more seats where you have a higher productivity rate, that's fantastic. But how do you grow while you're still trying to provide the care that you need to provide? And that's really what you're looking at here. So for that same size call center, if you look over at the other chart here, at the labor rate, you're talking $47 a call. Can you afford $47 a call? Looking at that model, it just doesn't work. So how can you flip that for your team and for your patients so that you can provide excellent patient care and still have some cost-saving benefits without burning out your team? So how do you optimize? How do you grow? It's going to take more seats, or it's going to take you having a better way to identify the gaps and optimize. How do you do that? So we'll go on to the next slide. So how do we do that is really what we're here for today. We utilize business intelligence. The transparency of CareXM is going to show you why are you receiving calls. That's how you solve all your problems. How do you decrease the workload after hours so that you don't need more nurses or your patients aren't in a crisis situation? You're more proactive with your care. And the way you do that is knowing why you're receiving calls. So here at CareXM, we are all about actionable insights into your care so that you can provide faster, more efficient workflows and allowing for the analysis of that data to really help you to make a proactive approach. And that is going to be vital in finding yourself to be an innovative business partner and an innovative provider for your patients. So how do you look at those trends? So within our platform, you have the option to look at over 15 reports and having every single detail about that call. You can listen to the calls as they're all recorded on our platform. So what you really can do is take the emotion. So we talked a lot about perception. The perception of your patients is your patient's reality. And whether that was the level of care they received, or if it's just the perception of the care, it's still important. So we can take the emotion out of that by adding the data, and it's extremely important. So with those call recordings, you'll be able to have a very real-time look into what's happening at your calls. You can also look at a more macro level where you can see why you're receiving calls, what those things are looking like. Why are they calling in? Well, for example, are you having an influx in medication refill calls? So we'll go ahead and pop to that next slide. So if you can decrease the amount of unneeded, unscheduled interactions, because after hours, you're going to have unscheduled interactions, that's the point. But how many of them are unneeded? How many of them could have been avoided with proactive care, different case management? What could you have done to avoid that influx of calls that's creating your patients to have an after hours emergency? So here's one example. You can kind of compare like organizations as to what kind of percentage of calls you're having. So let's say you're having a big influx in medication refill calls. Can you change your case management during the week? Can you call on every Tuesday morning, your case managers call and check on their patients? How are you doing with your medications? How are you feeling about that? How are you looking on supplies? So that come Friday, all of that's been taken care of. They can get through that weekend and know that they're going to have all the supplies that they need. And if they're calling, it's because it's legitimately urgent. And they really need that support from your nurse or potentially a visit. So that's one way that you can analyze those unscheduled interactions to allow you to have more significance in your care during the week to decrease the workload after hours. And that can also improve your patient experience. They really feel cared for. They're not needing to be proactive on their own because you're being proactive for them, it's just like a touch that really makes a big difference. We can go on to the next. So something that we really focus on here at CareXM is first call resolution, speed to answer. As Bridget mentioned, minutes matter. Those moments, those tiny little minutes in the day can have such an impactful impact on all of our clientele. So the national average being 30 minutes to reach a clinician, that is just heartbreaking to me, thinking about a patient who just had a family member who passed, or they're having an urgent situation with their wound. They need help and they're stressed and they're scared and they're going to wait 30 minutes on average. Well, our patients don't wait 30 minutes on average. Our average is 32 seconds. And in addition to that, we pride ourselves on first call resolution, getting a caller to the right place the first time, getting that first call resolution. And it can be really impactful to your patients as they're in that stressful situation. The person that answers the phone helps them, supports them, comforts them, which is it just goes a long way in their perception of how they're being cared for. So how can you align your strategy to your needs that you have now? It takes a lot of time to grow. You have to potentially stop what you're doing or pause your growth so that you can innovate and create that strategy to grow and move forward from there. And so that can take time. How do you align that strategy and grow now is really what can be impactful. What we provide is really a roadmap for home health and hospice agencies to scale, to grow while reducing cost and saving time all at the same time. So you don't have to work as hard to grow because you have a partner working with you to help grow with you, which is really exciting. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our how. How do we do that? So this all makes sense, right? Using data, making smart, educated decisions so that you can use those to make smart business decisions, right? So if you want to just click through to open up the whole slide, thank you. So our goal is really more of a holistic care approach to healthcare. So as we are talking about the normal model, so typical, you have a patient calling in and the call is going to forward maybe directly to a cell phone for your nurse. And that's been the normal for a long time. Potentially there's an answering service in the middle, which is definitely increasing that answer rate as you're trying to get calls to the right place, likely a non-clinical answering service. So what our team does is it really has this, which you'll see, we call the magic cloud, where we have routing. So it's routing calls directly to the person that it's meant to answer the phone, recording and reporting that data analytics. So with our system, we can kind of pull together some EMR interfacing, allowing our nurses to have a one-stop shop. Here's everything we need to know about your business in one place so we can be an extension of your team and answer those calls directly. Your patient calls in, they get answered by a registered nurse in that quick average of 32 seconds. And they're going to get that first call resolution. We're going to be able to triage your patients, take care of them, be an extension of your team so that you have a workforce behind your team, allowing for those unscheduled interactions. And if we can't handle the problem and we need to dispatch a nurse to be in person and have that visit so that they can get the care that they need, we have the ability to do that through our technology, where we can do that quickly with secure messaging and of course calling as well. So that is one way that we can have the autonomy to kind of take a look and what we call like our magic. Another great solution that we offer, and we can move to the next slide. Let's say you have a team, a fantastic team of nurses that you're like, well, they are available. We don't need you necessarily to take our calls. So we have a solution where we can get those calls direct to your caregivers. So your patient calls in and it routes directly to a nurse that's available from your organization that can give that intimate care within knowledge of your patients quickly. And if they're in a visit, let's say that they're in a death visit or they're in the middle of a sterile procedure trying to change a dressing, they can mark themselves unavailable and move it on to the next person in line, or our team's there to back them up. So if they're unavailable because they're in a visit, they have that autonomy and that ability to disconnect, to focus on what's important, which is that patient in front of them. They're not answering that phone, as Bridger said, is just can be so rude. I mean, this philosophy of what we're talking about is why our company and our platform was even built in the first place. And so the allowing your nurses to have that ability. And they're also having the analytics to code their own calls and identify why they're receiving calls. You can take all of that data and start putting it back in to how can we prevent calls? What could we do to better ourselves, continue the improvement while you have the support and the workforce of CareXM behind you. I think we kind of covered that already, so we'll just go ahead and skip to the next. So I want to kind of give you a case study. This is a case study of a client that really is just, we're kind of intertwined. We are partners, we are one, we grow, they grow. It's just a beautiful connection. So we can go ahead and get to the understanding unscheduled interactions, what this is all about, right? So this client took business analytics to the next level. They closely looked at their unscheduled interactions to sculpt their business plan and make changes. So here in this heat map, what we're going to call it, you can see all of the calls. So the pink is going to represent daytime, and the peak volumes are going to be obviously the higher. Light blue, you're going to see peak volume times just before the office opens and after it closes. And then the dark blue is going to be the overnight. So you can see these peaks are going to vary by day, by hour, and what all of that is looking at. And you can see the scale at the bottom here is it's a 24-hour clock as you're kind of looking at by day of week. So how do you plan for these unscheduled interactions, and what do they look like? As we go to the next slide, you're going to see how this client was able to, when they started at a census of probably about 1,800, and this is their growth. On the black line is going to be their enterprise growth, so their census growth, and then the blue line is going to be their call, the amount that they're taking calls. So let me go back, sorry. That gray line is going to be their inbound call total, and the blue line is the number of calls that they have been taking. So you can see as they started out, their census was low, and they continue to grow rapidly. And we're looking at a couple of years stretch. So they were able to more than triple in volume. And you can see here where the lines intersect, that's going to be their peak performance. So right there in the middle of 2020, when everybody else was frantically trying to figure out how to care for their patients, they hit peak performance where they were able to accept most, if not all of their patient calls, and they found that consistency in the patient experience, and they were able to predict the variable outcomes and align their staffing to meet them. So utilizing the data to decrease unscheduled interactions and having the technology in place to be able to take those calls for their patients and find that productivity phenomena that everybody's looking for. And as you can see, their census kept growing, but really their calls have plateaued. So even though they exponentially grew in census, they did not have an exponential growth in their inbound calls, which is obviously what we're all looking for, right? And so we'll go to the next slide. So kind of the results of all of that, a 5-time increase in census while reducing unscheduled interactions by 50%. So this is not the emotions that, oh, I was so busy last night on call, or I feel just like we have so much going on. This is actual data. We're taking the emotion out, we're taking out the perception. This is reality, that their numbers showed that they had a monumental growth while they were able to lower cost and lower unscheduled interactions, allowing for their staff to have a better work-life balance, their patients to be cared for effectively as they tried to find their optimal productivity level. So how do we relieve staffing challenges while improving the patient experience? How do you find that alignment? How do you align? That's kind of what all of this is about, right? First call resolution, getting that call to the person that can solve their problem quickly. Optimizing workflow, reducing expenses, maximizing your reimbursements. You know, as we talk about improving HCAP scores, as much as those are important, we're really talking about improving the perception of care and the actual quality of care received, so that those Google and all of those reviews that we're talking about that everyone's looking up, how do you improve that? You give impactful care. You know, we can reduce after-hour calls by 50%, improved patient experience, re-engagement of nurses, reduced rehabilitation by 88%. It's just some of the things that we have had positive outcomes from clients that have utilized our service. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Bridger.
Thank you, Sarah. So, I mean, really what's ahead, you know, and we'll go to your questions right after this, but, you know, where we're at is really a reactionary type state. And it's creating symptoms in our healthcare organization type approach, to where we're dealing with the symptoms of unscheduled interactions. We're dealing with the symptoms of more people leaving the space, but what's the root cause of all of that? And that's what we're really working to drill down into. And we feel the more proactive we can be, just like the DirecTV example I was sharing earlier, if my cable goes out, my satellite goes out, but DirecTV calls me and I don't have to wait an hour on the customer service line, how would I feel about, even though the product wasn't working, how would I feel about DirecTV? I'm immediately wanting to leave a 5-star review, and they have a customer for life because they just saved me an hour of frustration. Well, imagine that in the healthcare setting. It's 10 times, 100 times, a million times more emotional than the frustration of your cable going out. But taking a proactive approach to that is really makes all the difference. You know, and that's really what we're trying to get to is technology, and that's where we're going. You know, we have 100 RNs in your back pocket. We have, you know, 600 PCAs that can take non-clinical calls, save a lot of money that way, especially with our routing technology. But the technology should enhance the side of human care, not detract from it. It actually should connect us even further and build more automation, build more ability for clinicians to focus on the patient that they're truly treating at the time, or that they're triaging on the phone and not be buried, you know, 5 deep in calls that they're trying to answer. And so really, as we look ahead, it's really going to be about delivering the patient experience while bending the cost curve, and empowering clinicians is truly at the heart of I think what we all need to be focused on. But with that, I'll turn it over to any questions that we have, Patrick or Grace.
Yes. So it looks like we did get a few, and let's just start with this one that came in about, you know, how do we address, because I feel like we've talked about, you know, macro and micro issues. How do we address macro concerns while ensuring the day-to-day needs are met?
Okay. Do you want me to take that one, Sarah? Do you want?
Oh, I think that's a really great question. Maybe we can tag team it, Bridger. I think that the real answer is going to be identifying the trends. So your nurse's focus is going to be caring for your patients. How can we support that? Giving them an extra arm of your company, as Bridger said, 100 nurses that are backing them up, knowing that they have the piece to be able to focus on what that day-to-day importance is. And as we're working together, partnering together, you're identifying trends, looking at that data, being able to see, wow, we're receiving 50 medication refill calls a week, or look at the amount of pain calls compared to the average of clients like us. Maybe we need to work on educating those caregivers on how to manage those urgent situations before they get there. It really can help identify where the holes are, and you can work with your case managers to improve the amazing care they're already giving by focusing it on where the holes are. Because it's really, when we're talking about patient care, it's such a big picture. It's such a big, we need to teach them how to do this. We need to make sure we are managing all of these different things. So if you know where the holes are, you can really focus that case management effectively. And so you can work micro by looking at the macro and identifying those holes. And I'll let Bridger add to that if he finds some more color.
You nailed that pretty well. No, I do think, I think it really is taking an insightful type approach of gathering insights from a data standpoint, as well as from what your clinicians are feeling, experiencing, kind of a day in the life, you know, of understanding what that looks like and what the true challenges are. So instead of this whack-a-mole type approach, it's very much a strategic one of gathering the data, gathering the insights, and then diagramming those basically to work together towards a solution that can, you know, solve the bleeding wounds right now in your workflows, but also address a longer term care plan for your company of how you address the influx, the demands of patients, while ensuring that you can keep clinicians on staff.
Yeah. And I have one other thing I'd like to add to that. We actually had a client go live this week, and they have had a really negative experience with a previous answering service. Coming on to ours, we had a nurse chime in on our first night review that said, you know, I didn't get a call last night, but the piece that I had knowing that there was somebody answering those calls gave me so much more like peaceful mind, and my heart was just in a better place knowing that our patients were being taken care of, and it wasn't fully my responsibility to do that 100%. And I could focus on me sometimes too. And that was just inspiring that she didn't even get a call. She just felt the difference of having a partner like CareXM.
Very nice. Okay, let's see what else we have. We have one more, and it's, what issues that maybe come up often in the home health and hospice space do you believe, I don't know, have simple or quick answers, but just kind of maybe some that you are more focused on and that, home health and hospice providers should really kind of hone in on? Are there any particular issues that come to mind when thinking about that?
Up to you, sir. I'm glad to go first this time if you like.
You can go first this time.
Yeah, so there is some, and Sarah will know even more than me, of course. Consistently, I think that there is a phenomenon of just solve my bleeding wound now, take my calls now. Like we're drowning in unscheduled events, we're drowning in call volumes. Can you just take them now? And we can. We can take them within 2 weeks. We can onboard, start taking calls, and we can be primary, we can be backup, we can do it however you like. We can change the hour blocks even, depending on the forecasting and everything like that. And we definitely help with that, of course, with our benchmarking data as well. But I would say a lot of the conversations are around that front of, listen, I understand the solving for this long term, but right now I'm drowning in the ocean and I have a comorbidity. But throw me the life vest first. Give me the life vest, and then we can talk about a longer term care plan, a longer term strategy. And so I think that's a commonality right now. And then also with just the shifts in value-based purchasing and what that looks like, what changes are going to have happen, and how do we, I would say the core is elevating the patient experience while keeping costs in a place that, not only stay flat, but you start seeing growth financially, both top line and bottom line.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And I would also add that by having a nurse answering the phone all of the time, your patients are going to have that peace of mind and knowing that they're cared for. And sometimes that peace can be enough. Having that interaction after hours of, wow, I really was just taken care of. They know that they are, and they may call less. I've identified that with many of our clients. And in addition to that, giving that peace to the nurses, as I just mentioned in the last example, allows, sometimes when you're burnt out, you just can't see past what you're experiencing. You're so overwhelmed and you're so exhausted that you're like, I just have to go to this visit. I can't think about anything else. And so we can help to take some of that burden and help carry it with you, allowing your team to just take a breath and say, okay, what's next? And that's really important. And as we're talking about growth and innovating and all of these things, it sounds like work, and it can be work, but having a partner that works with you and really kind of gives you a cheat sheet of, hey, this is where you're lacking. This is your progress report, and the test is coming. Let's work on these things and really improve that. So I think that you'll find that that's a problem that we're having with so many clients. Nurse burnout, all of those things, as we talked about in the beginning. I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse there, but just partnering with somebody that can help you in that overwhelmed state, allowing you to get your feet back on the ground and go from there.
And remove the pit out of their stomach in terms of staffing. The pit that Sarah was talking about, we can help remove that to where we'll share the load in a dial up, dial down approach and alleviate your staff so they can actually breathe and enjoy what they're doing day to day.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that is all the questions that we've had. So that has, I believe we've reached the end of our time here. I want to once more thank Bridger and Sarah, and to all of you in the audience for spending some time with us today. Thanks again to CareXM for sponsoring this webinar, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.